Good morning, everyone. I'm Carla Meyrink from the Community for Learning in Santo Domingo, Dominican Republic. And here with me today, I have Erin Blackwelder and Andrea Mariñez. Erin is the teacher who wrote the blog post that originally inspired me to try flipping my feedback. And Andrea is a new teacher. She's been in the classroom for less than a year now, and she's a risk taker. She's been trying this for the past two months. Erin, would you like to introduce yourself?
Good morning, everybody. How are you doing today?
Okay. And Andrea, let's give you a shot.
Hi, everyone. Like Carla said, my name is Andrea Mariñez. I've been a first-year teacher in the Community for Learning, and I've enjoyed every minute of it, trying new things and seeing where it goes.
Okay. Thanks, Andrea. Okay. Well, thanks both of you for being here. And those of you who are watching, thank you for joining in with us. If you have any questions or comments and you're on the live chat, you can just go into the group chat and write them down, and we'll try to get back to you with any answers that you need. Okay, I'm going to go on to the presentation here. Okay, I've taught writing workshop for the past 25 years, and I'm a strong believer in the power of writing workshop. However, as all language arts teachers know, there's just never enough time in class to give thorough feedback to students. So we spend a lot of our personal time reading student work and giving them feedback in writing. I was spending all my evenings and weekends writing feedback on student drafts and feeling frustrated when many of them didn't apply it. And I really had to wonder, did they understand what I was writing? Did they even read it? For whatever reason, second and third drafts were often much like the rough drafts, with just a few minor changes. I was working much harder than they were, and I had to find a solution. So I began doing some research and looking for an answer. I'm a member of the Teachers Going Gradeless group on Facebook, which I highly recommend. This is an inspiring group of teachers who are always willing to help. Whenever I need something, that's where I go. As I was looking through the Teachers Going Gradeless site, I stumbled upon a post by Erin Blackwelder called How to Value Time While Providing Great Feedback. Of course, this sounded like the answer I was looking for, so I read his post, and it talked about restructuring class time in order to have longer chunks of time for conferences. He also talked about the power of giving feedback directly to students instead of working alone at home. Hello, this made so much sense. So I decided to give it a try in the next writing unit I was starting with my students. I knew the first thing I would have to change is the class schedule in order to free up more time for conferences. I also had a problem with students arriving late to class. If I wanted this to work, I needed to make sure we used absolutely every minute of our class time. In my old schedule, we started with hold on, are you guys hearing an echo, or is that just me hearing that?
No, I hear it too.
You hear it too?
Okay. Yeah, I'm hearing. You're cutting in and out for me again.
Yeah. Okay. Darn.
And it's going from the presentation to Erin.
It's going back and forth?
Yeah.
Okay. Is it on the presentation now?
Yes.
Yeah.
Can you hear me now?
No, yeah. It's not. Yes.
Okay. Let's just keep trying. So anyway, I realized that by listening to the word of the day, the students felt no real incentive to be in class on time because they knew if they missed the word of the day, they could get it from a friend. I decided to start my class with the mini lessons, since this was most important to the students. Of everything we did, this was the most important part. They'd make more of an effort to get to class on time, which resolved one of my problems. Sometimes this might also include a short 5-minute writing activity, a discussion of our shared reading, or it just might be a read aloud. After that, everything would be student-led. So each day, the student in charge of the word of the day would also be in charge of the class. I gave them any handouts the students might need. So for instance, if there was a vocabulary quiz, they had to get the students set up and hand out quizzes. After that, students would work on reading or writing workshop. The leader was also in charge of making sure the class was on task. If things got too noisy, I would not have to stop to identify the issue and deal with it. Instead, I could just call out, hey, Maria, your class is getting noisy, and the student leader would take care of the problem. I tied this into our work on developing leadership skills so that students took it a little bit more seriously. I teach writing twice a week and literature twice a week. During the weeks that I'm showing here in white, I didn't go do any in-depth conferencing, just the regular conferences I've always done, quick 2 or 3 minute discussions to follow up on how students were doing and give them support. Even though I wasn't doing in-depth conferences, I did keep the format of the student-led classes so they would be used to it, and so every student would get a chance to lead, since they really enjoyed being in charge. And also, I have to say, my classes ran a lot smoother when I did this kind of classroom setup. During the weeks in yellow, I did in-depth conferences. Those weeks, I tried to plan for shorter mini lessons in order to free up as much time as possible for conferencing. My conferences generally take 8 to 10 minutes. I think yours are shorter, right, Aaron? How many do yours take?
Yeah, mine are, I try to make them about 7 minutes. It depends upon how many students are in the class, but I try to do about 7 to 8 minutes for mine.
Yeah, I have a hard time with that. What about you, Andrea?
Well, I am a new teacher, so I'm getting the grasp of it all. It usually takes me 10 to 12 minutes per student still.
Yeah. So with practice, it does get better. I know that when we were working with our teachers trying to get the quick conferences down to 2 or 3 minutes, and most of them were able to go faster with practice, but it does take experience. I would say to teachers trying this, though, even if you have large classes and many students, it's really worth trying to give it a try. So the next thing I had to do was schedule 4 or 5 students for each conference day. I asked students to choose the days they'd like to meet, and these days would remain the same throughout the 6-week unit. For instance, if a student signed up for a Thursday here, then they would always conference on Thursdays. That way, after the first conference, they would each have the same amount of time to hand in their next draft. I thought the sign up would be difficult because some students would have to sign up for Monday or Tuesday, and that would give them a shorter time to hand in their first draft. But they were actually fine with this, and most students really got their first choice of conferencing day. So I put in several procedures to make this work. I told the students that they needed to share their draft with me on Google Drive the day before so that I could read them in advance. I wouldn't have time to read them in class. So I would read the 4 to 5 drafts the night before, or for me early in the morning, because I tend to be a morning person. And I would jot down a few questions for the students in preparation for the conference. I might take a few notes on what I was noticing, but these were quick notes, not something I put time into. So the process of reading would take me about half an hour to read through 5 pieces. I also asked that on the day of their conference, students would bring in a printed copy of their piece so that we could write directly on it. This is optional. I personally like a printed draft to work on, but I know other teachers prefer to work digitally. So if the students didn't share their pieces the night before, they would be the last one to conference, since reading the piece would take time, and I didn't want to take that away from the other students. As soon as they realized this, my students were really careful to share their drafts with me. They loved the conferences and didn't want to miss them. In fact, many of my students would arrive to class early saying, "Carla, can I have the first conference, please?" And they were definitely eager to meet with me and get feedback. So I set my class on Google Slides. That's the way we do it in our school. And after the mini lesson, this is the slide that would come up. So each day I would write in the name of the student who would be responsible for the word of the day and for leading the class. For instance, Helen, the student in 11A, was in charge of the word of the day and would get up and click on the blue hyperlink that says 11A here. And this would take her to her word of the day slides. So this is Helen's first slide, introducing the word of the day.
Aaron's not with us anymore.
Pardon?
Is Aaron still here? I don't see him in the back.
Oh, did he disappear?
Yeah. It's weird.
Well, maybe he'll come back. Let's see what happens.
Okay.
So once the students finished teaching the word of the day, they would click on a link that would take them to the activity choices slide. So sometimes there would be a mandatory activity like this grammar quiz, and then free choices. Here's the free choices. The leader was responsible for making sure everyone did the mandatory activity before beginning their optional work. Most of the time, however, there would simply be a variety of choices. Students could choose to work on whichever choice they preferred. I found that having a choice tended to help keep the class more engaged. Our first draft conferences usually focused on content or organization of ideas. In the conferences, rather than telling students what they should do, I asked questions so that they could discover the areas they needed to work on. My long-term goal was to teach them to be able to critique their own work and become independent writers. This is where I see the power of grading with students. If I write a question on a draft, they might not know how to respond. So, as we talked with them, if I'm talking directly to them, I could ask further questions and push their thinking. In this unit, we were working on coming-of-age stories, and when I asked, show me your coming-of-age moment, students would begin to tell me about it. Well, it's when my character figures out that, and they would go on. I would stop them and say, no, don't tell me about it. Show it to me in your story. As they'd look for a specific moment in their writing, they'd realize that they hadn't really expressed it. This was a great jumping off point for discussing how to structure their story, how could they show the reader what had happened, how could they expand the moment and make it meaningful. If students were writing an essay, the same strategy would apply. I would ask students to show me their thesis statement or their analysis. By having to point these things out directly in their papers, they see what's missing and realize that they need to add information. But it's them coming to that conclusion, not me telling them what to do. So these are some of the examples of questions I tend to ask. I like to question rather than tell, as this allows me to check for understanding while helping students understand the feedback better and take charge of their writing. So the second draft conferences, for most students, this deals with word choice, sentence structure, and author's craft. But of course, this all depends on the student. Some of them might be still struggling with putting their story together. And so my second conference would continue to deal with content. By the same token, a very strong writer might already have polished the piece by the second draft and be ready to, and they don't really need to do a third draft. So I would just say, okay, it's time to publish and you can start working on something else. I keep this completely flexible in order to meet their needs. While conferencing, I try to focus on the positive, since my philosophy is that you can't build anything on negatives. I might say, hey, I really love this sentence. Listen as I read it. Why do you think I like it so much? What have you done here? When the student identifies the strength, I can say, yes, exactly. Do you think you need to do more? You can do more of that kind of writing down here? Then I can point to a part of the draft that still needs work. I find that students tend to do their best writing at the beginning of a draft, and then they rush the ending. When they see the difference between their strong writing and their weaker writing, they have a clear idea of what they need to do. I often ask students to read parts of their writing aloud so they can hear it and identify the strength or what they can do to improve. Reading their work aloud is a strategy that I want them to embrace, but many of them tend to skip. I hope that by doing this with me, they'll begin to see that the reading aloud strategy really works and will start using it when they're revising or editing their work on their own. But generally speaking, these are the kind of comments I make during the second draft. Again, I focus on asking, not telling. And the final conference is a time to reflect on their learning. I especially like to ask them how they can apply what they've learned to their next piece of writing. Although in this example, students were writing coming-of-age stories, I wanted them to see that much of what they learned can be applied to essays, research papers, or even emails. I want them to see the why behind what we're doing. I let them know that even though most of them don't aspire to become published authors, they will need to communicate through writing no matter what they do. All of the skills they're learning can be applied to the many different types of writing they'll do in their lives. I have to say that this is the first time in my 25 years of teaching writing that I've seen all of my students make a concerted effort to apply the skills I've taught them. So these are some of the reflections students made on their learning. Many of them picked up strategies for editing, revising, and even using a thesaurus properly. Several of my students tried to improve their writing by looking up simple words and replacing them with words they didn't know how to use correctly, making their writing pretty hard to understand. Learning other techniques, like using literary devices, helped them find better ways to improve their writing. They began to apply our lessons on sentence combining, and they felt they had a better idea of how to use their toolboxes in order to to refer to previous mini lessons. Some of them mentioned to me that although they paid close attention in class, they really didn't go back and refer to the lessons that had been given to them. They also mentioned that meeting for in-depth conferences helped them gain confidence in themselves as writers and see that they had strengths that they weren't aware of before. Overall, this was an extremely positive experiment. The students loved it and asked me to show other teachers how to do it. They said that the conferences helped them truly understand the feedback they got and that the in-depth verbal feedback motivated them to get started on their second and third drafts, and they felt successful as writers. Not one student handed their work in late during this unit. I think that speaks very loud for how they were feeling. Some of these students were notorious for handing in late work or for simply never doing it at all. Yet during this unit, they handed in every single draft on time. When I asked them why, most of them said, I finally understand what the feedback means and what I'm supposed to do. Across the board, their writing improved, even though I was no longer spending hours reading their drafts over the weekend. I wish I had discovered this 25 years ago, and I hope it will help you empower your students as you take back your personal time. Okay, I'm going to take us back to our, oh, you're back, Aaron. Okay. Yep. Okay, so Aaron, do you want to let us know how you might do things differently, or how things are going for you?
No, you sound like you hit pretty much how I do it. I really believe that giving students the positive feedback, as you said, not necessarily you didn't do this, but here's what I saw, here's what was really good about your writing, so I liked all that, and that's what I try to do. I always start off with here's what I noticed about your work, and I will point out many, many positive things. And then I'll ask them questions like you did. Could you read this part out loud to me? And I don't tell them that part was wrong. I just say, could you read this part out loud to me? And then when they do that, they automatically hear the errors. And then I'll ask them the question, how did reading it out loud help you improve your writing there? And they'll say, wow, I was able to fix my errors. I said, well, maybe you should read the whole thing and get that taken care of. So I would say, Carly, you are pretty much doing exactly how I would do it.
Okay.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so I have a question for you, because you've been doing this longer than I have. Have you found that the kids are starting to come to you themselves with their ideas, or that they're becoming a little more aware of the changes they need to make over time since you've been doing this for a while? Or are you still guiding it?
I'm sorry, what was the last part of that?
Are you still guiding it, or do they now come more to you with questions?
One of the things I try to do is at the beginning of the year, I'm obviously guiding them. I teach freshmen, and I'm guiding them through it. And as we go through the year, I try to, as my principal says, hand the pen over to them. Okay. Whoever has the pen in their hand is the one that has the power. And I know when I'm sitting down guiding them through that first couple of conferences, I'm the one with the power. And when I hand them the pen, or we have computers, but when I put the computer in their lap and give them control of the keyboard, I start having them guide me through their essays and explain to me how they're meeting these things. And so by the end of the year, and it takes a whole year to get them to that point, and some of them don't get there. But as we get towards the end of the school year, like we'll be conferencing on essays very soon, they are. Most of the students are guiding me through their work. So yeah, it's a very reflective, very empowering process.
Great. And another question for you. How many students do you teach per day? Like how many in a class? How many classes?
Yeah, I have about 120 students, 5 classes. So yeah, my classes are somewhere, I think my average class size is like 25 right now. So okay. I have decent sized classes.
And how much time do you have in a class period?
55 minutes.
55 minutes. Okay. And you managed to get through all those conferences in a week without?
Sometimes in a week. Sometimes it goes a little longer, sometimes a little shorter. It depends upon where we are in the school year and what's going on.
Okay. So, yeah. So you're flexible with all of that?
Yeah, very flexible. And, I was told many years ago when I was going through my my certification program that I will make time for what I value. And if I value student writing, then I'm going to make time for it. If I value student revision, then I'm going to make time for it. And then I had a conversation where the department, it was about 5 or 6 years ago, one of our teachers was complaining, our kids don't go back and revise their work. They don't go back and edit their work. And then I started to ask the question, well, why? Why aren't they doing that? And I had been doing conferencing midterm on student writing, helping them along the process, but had not done it at the end of the process at that point. And I figured, I'm going to give it a try. And then when I did, I saw how kids understood the power of that feedback and the power of giving them opportunities to continue to revise the work, because that's what writers do. They don't write it once, turn it in, and hope that it's going to get published. They write it, they turn it in, they revise it, they reflect on it, and then when they turn it in to their publisher, the publisher finds things that need to be revised in it, and then they go back and revise again. So it's a process. It's an ongoing process, and kids need to see that.
Good, thank you. Okay, yeah, I agree completely. That's why I think writing workshop is such a powerful thing. As when I was a kid, I basically handed in rough drafts every single time, and that was it. Rough draft got graded. So yeah, I think this is powerful. Andrea, I wanted to ask you, because I know that you've been struggling a little bit more with some of the time frame and what's going on with your kids. How are you finding this?
Well, yeah, but first I do want to point out on the positives on this, because as a new teacher, I'm learning how to conference with kids, trying to make it time efficient and to be able to touch on the important things that students need to work on. At the beginning of the year, I was trying that 3 to 2 minute conferences with them, and I saw that I wasn't able to tell them everything that I wanted to tell them. And I think that this gave me the opportunity to keep learning that whole process and the conferences, and give me the time to spend with the kids that I need to. I did struggle a little bit with the whole scheduling part of it. I think that it is important to plan strategically. If you get to know your students, I think it's better to plan the schedule in a sense that okay, these are the students I can count on, that they always turn in their work on time. So I want to put them with someone maybe that doesn't hand in their work on time, just because that can mess up with your schedule, like it happened to me. I do have younger kids than Carla does, so they're still with that organizational they're working on their organizational skills and time management. So I do suggest planning accordingly and strategically. But overall, it was a very positive experience in my class. And I think next year I'll be a lot more organized in that manner. And if I do try it again, I'll be able to work on it better. And maybe I'll get my conferences to be 7 minutes like Karen's.
Great. Okay. Is there anything either of you would like to add that sounds important? My takeaway from this is it's not only about giving the kids a little more time and letting them reflect on their work, and that they become empowered to see what they're doing and understand your feedback better, but it really creates a relationship between the students and I. And although I feel like I've had strong relationships with my students, this has really clinched it. They love this time, one-on-one time that's a little bit more extended. What do you guys think?
Yeah, I completely agree. I feel that my relationships with my students are much better now than they were years ago when I wasn't conferencing with kids. I not only know my students as writers now, but I also get to know them personally, and I get to know their own interests. And sometimes our conferences, when we have 7 minutes and we have 2 minutes left, we begin to talk about baseball, or we talk about whatever else we can talk about. But I feel that one of the things that I felt before when I'd have students turn in writing and I would grade it and give it back to them and put comments on it, is there just seemed to be this fear in my class of writing. And as we go through the year and kids are conferencing with me, that fear seems to diminish. Now, I still have some reluctant writers. I think we'll always have those reluctant writers. But even with them, I feel like they trust me to help them rather than I'm going to judge them. And I can yeah, I just feel that it's why we went into teaching. We went into teaching because we wanted to help kids. We care about kids. We wanted to build relationships with them and empower them to become better than what they are. And we can't do that if we sit at home in isolation, reading their work and putting a stamp of A through F on it. It just doesn't happen
that way. Okay, and that brings me to really one of the things that I think is so important here is that I don't have to spend the evenings and the weekends either. I mean, this is the secondary part of it, because the most important thing is what your kids are getting out of it. But it's really, really makes me a better teacher to walk into the classroom refreshed because I actually had a weekend, and that helps as well. So I see that there are some people watching us. Do any of you have questions or any comments that you'd like to make? You can write it on the chat for us to see. Okay. Okay, well then, thank you both, and thanks for being with us today. It was a lot of fun.
Thank you, Carla.
Well, thank you, Carla.
Bye-bye. Bye, everyone, and thank you to MAD PD for allowing us to do this. It was something new for me, certainly exciting, and I hope that the viewers will be able to take this information and change the way that they are conferencing with their students. Thank you. Bye.